Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody in between, welcome to another episode of the Jake Botel Sports Experience. On today's episode, we will whip around the Hurling Championship, recapping for you all of the action from the Joe McDonough Cup, the Leinster Hurling Championship, and the Munster Hurling Championship, with a focus on three games: Wexford v Dublin, Limerick v Waterford, and Tipperary v Clare. If you'd be so kind while you watch along, hit that subscribe button. I've just hit 50 subscribers, so a massive thank you to everyone who has hit that button, and a massive thank you to all those who will hit it in the future. Wexford v Dublin, round 2 of the Leinster Hurling Championship, played at Chadwick's Wexford Park. Wexford would have come into this game hoping that they'd blown away any cobwebs that were lingering from that league semi-final loss to Waterford, with that second half comeback against Galway last week, where they stormed back to draw the game. Dublin came into this game having sort of done enough against Laois to sort of get away with, I think it was a 2-point victory in week 1. And it was Dublin that started the better of the two teams. Owen O'Donnell scored a brilliant point after 5 minutes, galloping out of the back line, riding a hit and depositing the ball over the bar to give the visitors the lead. Shortly after, they doubled their advantage, and it was 3-1 after 6 minutes. Wexford looked flat. The cobwebs had returned. They fell behind 7-2 after 15 minutes. Wexford was still creating, some opportunities, but spurning a lot of chances. They did narrow the gap back to 2 points, but it was pretty clear that Dublin were the cleaner side. And this is something that's really struck me about Wexford since the league sort of hit that semi-final stage where they were blown apart by Waterford. Wexford had looked so clean, so organised, so sharp, that the passing skills, particularly their stick passes, hitting from the hurl to another player, were elite in those first 5 games of league. It was something that I really made a point of in my mind, of saying, wow, like Dara Egan really has these, Wexford players passing the ball with supreme confidence, just getting the ball and smacking it with the hurl 40 to 50 meters downfield to someone, hitting a player in the hand. And that was in the long game, that was in the short game as well. They were just pinging the ball backwards and forth, zigging and zagging, and finding space and working space so well in those first 5 league games. And then it all hit the skids in that semi-final against Waterford, and it's not returned now through 2 games of championship play. It would be easy, I guess, to say that it's a confidence thing, and that may be part of it. But something that I think, watching them play Galway in the first half last week and Dublin this week, I feel like that championship intensity, the championship level of pressure, doesn't allow you as much space, to judge a pass, to hit a pass. The players downfield aren't as open. They're not as in as much space to pass to. And I feel like that is really, curtailing what Wexford are able to do. That they are not able to execute with that same level of cleanness and efficiency in championship as they were in the league. So they're finding the going tough. And Dublin were really up for the challenge. This is a team now that has been together under the same management, for a bunch of seasons. And where Galway faded in the second half, they really collapsed, and Wexford roared back in. That's a Galway team under a first-year manager in Henry Shefflin. That's a Galway team learning, perhaps Shefflin's system, learning about what they do in certain scenarios, what they do when the player's developing in certain ways. Wexford, also a team under first-year management in Dara Egan, still learning exactly, okay, this is how we respond in this situation. This is where we want to go with the ball in this scenario. If player X is here, and player Y is here, we want to go to X for reason, A, B, and C. Dublin know their system, and I think that's something that really showed up in the second half, and why Dublin were able to run this game out, because they have a real process about how they go about things. Now, there's arguments to be made, I'm sure, with, Wexford maybe having a more talented roster of hurlers. Smarter people, more educated people than me would be able to, evaluate those respective panels, I guess. But I've certainly heard that argument that Wexford, possess a deeper sort of panel of talent than Dublin do in the hurling department. But Dublin have a system. They have a group of players that are together under the same management. They know what they should do in these certain scenarios and what they did after halftime, holding a 13-9 lead. They didn't go into their shell. They came out and they ran at Wexford. They made a real attempt after halftime to go at Wexford's goal. And while they didn't get a score, they didn't get a 3-point score, it put Wexford under an immense sense of pressure, and it didn't allow them to sort of try and build that foothold immediately after halftime and get back in the game. Wexford kept missing points. Dublin kept scoring. Donald Burke was immense with 12 of his team's 24 points. Wexford got a penalty opportunity. Great chance to get back in the game. I think they were down 21-16 at that point, so they could have brought that 5-point margin back to 2. But Brennan in goal for Dublin made a beautiful save, diving low down to his left to turn it away. So that left Dublin holding a 21-16 point advantage with 15 minutes left. Dublin lose a man. Cian O'Callaghan gets sent off for a second yellow card. The margin is reduced to just 3 points with 10 minutes to play. So Wexford suddenly start to find a bit of voice in the crowd. They suddenly start to find a bit of play on the field. And you start thinking, oh dear, this is going to happen a second week in a row. And it would have felt like theft, really. Like last week's draw, I think Dublin were their own worst enemy. Galway were their own worst enemies in that second half. And really, Wexford were on top for most of the second half. This was a game where Dublin had been on top for the majority of the game. So I was worried that history was going to repeat here. But Dublin, and we refer back to the fact that they are a team that is under the same management a few seasons now. They knew what to do in those certain situations. They were able to put over a couple of points, extend the buffer back out. Wexford kept coming and they got that margin reduced to 1 point with 60 seconds left, but Dublin cling on. There was a superb defensive effort from one of their forwards or midfielders. I'm not sure. It was in the attacking half for Dublin. But they'd lost possession and Wexford were trying to bring it out on the sideline. And the Wexford players trying to hit it long up the sideline to launch an attack. And a Dublin player came across and full Superman, leapt to block the ball out of play. Now, Wexford did end up getting the ball from the sideline up into their forward half. But that block just ran a few more seconds off the clock, allowed Dublin to set up defensively. And then they ultimately saw out the game, winning 24-23. A magnificent 1-point win on the road for Dublin in Wexford. 23-24, the final score. Lee Chin scores 7 points for Wexford. O'Connor 5, Rec 3. Rec had a magnificent game. If Wexford had got over the line here, if they'd stormed back, I probably would have given Damien Rec my man of the match award. Mark Fanning scored 3 as well. For Dublin, Donald Burke, 12 points, 12 of the 24 points. So 50% of his team scores. And then you had 2 to Hayes, 2 to Whiteley, and 2 to Burke. So I'm giving Donald Burke my man of the match. I think it's pretty hard to look past a guy who scored 50% of his team's points. Speaking of scoring, we'll check out the full list of scorers for you. For Wexford, the multiple point scorers, Lee Chin with 7, Rory O'Connor 5, 3 to Rec, 3 to Fanning, and then singles all to those 5 other players at the bottom of the list there. For Dublin, it was the aforementioned Donald Burke, 12 points, and then the drop down to 2 each for Hayes, Whiteley, a couple of other Burks, and then singles to O'Donnell, Ryan, Crummy, and Mallet. What is coming up this week for Wexford? Well, Wexford hit the road for the first time this season as they travel to play Laois. Now, Laois have been riddled with injuries this season and they were picked apart pretty mercilessly by Kilkenny this weekend. Wexford have to arrest this slide in form that began in the league semi-final against Waterford. They've got to get wins in the next 2 games against Laois and Westmeath, and obviously they will fancy themselves to do just that, but they end their season against Kilkenny, so wins in back-to-back weeks here are absolutely crucial for Wexford if they want to ensure that they can be the 3rd team to qualify out of the Leinster Hurling Championship. For Dublin, who have now won back-to-back games. They can make it 3 wins from 3 when they travel to take on a Westmeath side that has conceded 83 points through 2 weeks of play. It's crucial for the Dubs that they beat Westmeath and they beat them well, as their final 2 matches in Leinster come at home to Kilkenny and on the road to Galway. Now, ideally what you want to do there in those last 2 games, I would imagine, is split. You want to see if you can find a win against Galway or Kilkenny, but Dublin will look to win this week against Westmeath, make it 3 wins from 3, and then really launch at Kilkenny and Galway in their final 2 matches. Now we turn our attention over to the Munster Hurling Championship, where Limerick welcomed Waterford into the TUS Gaelic grounds on Saturday 23rd at 7 p.m. Irish time. So a massive matchup. Waterford favoured as one of the teams, that can perhaps unseat Limerick this season. So this was a big acid test for Waterford. This was just a magnificent game. If you wanted, in my opinion, if I was going to show another Australian a game of hurling and say, look, this is what's great about this sport, you got to come and watch it. This game was it. This game was beautiful. It was physical. It was highly skilled. It was back and forth. It was everything you could hope for from a round 2 championship game between 2 of the contenders. This is a matchup we might see again. It's a matchup we might see again twice. We might see these 2 teams play in the Munster Hurling Championship final, and then we'll probably see them again down the road in an All-Ireland, finals matchup somewhere as well. So this might be just part 1. And it was Waterford who got the first 3 scores of the game to settle any sort of lingering nerves. As you'd expect, Limerick answered the call with 3 of the next 4 to close the gap to 1. The Daysha, though, no wilting flowers. In the face of Limerick storming back, as I said, with 3 of the next 4 points, Waterford had a surge of their own. They stretched their own lead out to 5 points after 16 minutes. When Caleb Lyons drove back-to-back points over the bar. I said to you earlier that this was a back-to-back, back-and-forth game with just, blow after blow from each team. Diarmaid Byrnes launches back-to-back scores himself to narrow the margin back to 3. Something that stood out in this match where, Limerick absolutely rolled Cork over last week and, really bullied them for mine, hunting in packs and turning them over and just out-physicaling them, if that's a word. It's probably not, but whatever. Waterford were up for it. They were up for going at Limerick, sometimes to their own detriment. I saw there was some Waterford fans, on Twitter and that sort of thing, bemoaning some of the times where Waterford tried to bullock their way through the green machine in the midfield. I liked their willingness to be physical. They were not going to be bullied like Cork were last week. They were willing to put the ball long and challenge, that Limerick defence. And there was players there for Waterford who were prepared to fight and win a 50-50 ball, which is something we didn't see from Cork last week. I thought Waterford competed excellently under pressure. So after Waterford had sort of sprung out to a little bit of a lead, the green wave rose on the field and around the stadium. The crowd at the Gaelic grounds were roaring. It's sort of like, you hear them talk about Liverpool at Anfield, sort of sucking the ball into the back of the net. That's sort of how it feels like when Limerick get up and about at the Gaelic grounds, that the ball starts to sort of be sucked over the bar and you can hear that roar just rising like a bit of a crashing wave. Stephen Bennett missed a couple of really uncharacteristic frees shortly before half time, and Aaron Galland then responded by drawing the scores level at 10 apiece. It was Aaron Galland who flung 2 points over the bar in the final moments of the first half to put Limerick up 14-13. I was interested to see if the teams hunted more goals in the second half. There was just 1 point from open play for Waterford, for the Waterford forwards in the first half. So that was sort of surprising given how creative they have been the last few weeks. Obviously against Tipperary last week and then throughout the league campaign. Stephen Bennett missed another free, his 3rd free in a row by my count, and Hegarty didn't miss when he got his opportunity. Limerick had suddenly extended their lead to 3 points. Diarmaid Byrnes put another one over to stretch it to 4, and you started to think, Waterford at breaking point here. Well, they responded. Stephen Bennett finally got a free over the bar again. They drew it back. Waterford rattled off a trio of scores, and we were all tied up with 25 minutes in the contest left. Aaron Gallan potted a couple of points. Limerick opened up a 4-point gap. The crowd was surging. Suddenly the margin was blown out to 7 points on the hour mark. And that was 7 points scored by Limerick without response at that stage. And you started to think this might be gone for Waterford unless they can get a goal. And get a goal is just what they did. Stephen Bennett stepped up and ricocheted a free into the Limerick net to close the gap to 4 with 7 minutes left. Waterford ran the ball at Limerick again, opening him up for a second time. It was Prendergast who rifled his shot past Nicky Quaid into the back of the net to reduce the margin to just 1 point. And suddenly you thought, this is going to turn the other way. Waterford are going to find something late and knock the reigning champs off here. But they are the reigning champs for a reason, and they ripped back into it. They put a few more points over themselves. They shut Waterford down, and they ran out Limerick 30-221 winners over the challenger. A magnificent first act in this matchup, which I said we might see a couple more times yet this season. Limerick, as I said, winning 30-221. It was Aaron Gallan, 13 points. It was Diarmaid Burns, 6 points. O'Neill 3, Hegarty 2 for Stephen Bennett, 1 goal 7, Austin Gleeson 5 points, Desi Hutchinson, who was electric for Waterford at times, particularly in the second half, 5 points, and Caleb Lyons 3 points. I'm making Aaron Gallan my man of the match. I've just thought that executing, when you hit double-digit points for your team, it's a massive benefit when you've got a forward who is hitting those frees. Have a look at the full scorers for you. Limerick had Gallan 13, Burns with 6, O'Neill 3, 2 points each to Hegarty, O'Donovan, Morrissey, and 1 each to Ryan and Reedy. For Waterford, 1-7 for Bennett, 5 each to Hutchinson and Gleeson, 3 to Lyons, a goal to Prendergast, and 1 point to Curran. What's coming up this week for these two teams? Well, Limerick will welcome a Tipperary side who we're about to talk about. They were quite shambolic against Clare to the Gaelic grounds this weekend. The Green Machine can wrap up All-Ireland finals qualification with a victory over the Premier County and knock Tipperary mathematically out of contention at the same time. I expect more of the same from this team this week. They are absolutely humming. They are playing the sort of hurling that has won them 3 of the last 4 All-Irelands. They're physical, they're skilled, they're fast, they're disciplined. They tick all of these boxes. They tick all the boxes. And so I don't think you're going to see Limerick fall off. Someone is going to have to find a different level in order to take them down. For Waterford, well, the Dacia have a bye this weekend, which perhaps comes at an excellent time after a physically demanding encounter, an emotionally draining encounter with Limerick. I think Liam Cahill will no doubt have plenty of positives to take away from the defeat and plenty of teaching points to work with his side on over their break in play. When they return, it's a clash with Cork, the side that they mauled in the league final. So I think things are still pretty ship-shape for Waterford so far. They'll want to come back and deal with Cork and sort of go on with their campaign from there. But they rode out a really good challenge from Tipperary in week 1. They gave Limerick an absolute shot in week 2. So a big tick, I would imagine, from Waterford so far. At least from my perspective, they'll probably have higher standards set for themselves. They probably would have really liked to go and pinch that 2 points today in Limerick, but they certainly showed they were capable of mixing it up with the champs. All right, our final matchup of the week was Tipperary taking on Clare, hosting Clare down at Turles on Sunday, April 24th at 2 p.m. Irish time. It was 11 p.m. On a Sunday evening for me, up till 1 a.m. watching this one. What a performance it was. Sadly for me and other Tip fans, it was a performance not from the home side, who, were much praised this week after their fine performance against Waterford in week 1. It was the Banner County who came out and produced one of the most dominant halves of hurling that I've watched in my 2 years following the sport. I'm sure everyone else has, more dominant examples, but maybe dominant's the wrong word. Lopsided. They blew out to a 1-3 to 1 lead early. Tip might have had a goal back themselves, but there was some good defensive work from Cork. Uh, you know, the Premier County looked like they were going to storm back into it up forward, but they spurned chances, and then Claire just carved them up going back the other way. Like, there was some attacking threat to Tip, particularly early in the game and then early in the second half. But down back, I don't know if I've seen a looser, more disturbed defensive performance on a hurling field in the 2 years that I've been watching. They were an absolute shambles down back. They conceded a penalty, which led to a third goal. There was a second goal between the first and the third, just in case you think I can't do math. There was a second goal. Clare were up 3-6 to 4 points. Tipperary couldn't buy a point. Clare were winning everything. They were like hurling skillfully. I mean, that's one thing that I sort of expected from Clare was talented hurling. They're obviously a talented hurling county, and they were welcoming back some hurling talent in players like Tony Kelly, players like O'Donnell, etc. So I expected that, but the way that they just blew Tip apart with blistering pace, with their work ethic, their aggression at the ball to win the 50-50 contest, to win the aerial ball. It was Tipperary were completely and entirely outworked in the first half. That's all there is to it, I guess. And I'm not trying to be overly negative. It's just a statement of fact. Clare ran absolutely riot. They were dominating in as lopsided a fashion as you're ever likely to see, and playing delightful, delightful hurling. If I was a neutral, I would have marveled at the spectacle, but as it was, I was sort of shrinking into a mild depression on my couch, just going, well, championship hurling's probably over for us in a meaningful way this season. Tip put 8 wides on the board in the first half, but Clare had 9. So, as much as Tip fans, we can say, oh, well, if we had scored a bit more efficiently. Well, God forbid Clare had scored efficiently. They might have been up 320 on the board by half time. Tip, as you'd expect, they came out charging. Jer Brown ran and carried and lashed the ball into the net to bring Tip to double-digit points, thank God. Gave the crowd a lift and gave the team a pulse in the contest, however vague. In the 49th minute, Barry Heffernan got a second breakthrough for Tipperary from a bizarre long shot. Just another sort of lob up from deep. I think he was trying to drop it over the bar for a point, but it just happened to drop over the goalkeeper's hand and into the back of the net. And suddenly Tipperary were down 2-7 to 3-13. So a long way back. And the commentary team, as they should, were, trying to build this into Tipperary, maybe they'll be thinking, maybe they'll be believing if they can get the home fans up behind them and all that sort of thing. Tipperary were not playing very well, and that second goal was a pure piece of luck. Clare, the far, far, far better team on the day. Tip, a sporadic threat up forward, I think is the best way to describe it. There wasn't any real sense of system, I felt. Some attacks, they looked incredibly dangerous. Other times, they looked bereft of ideas, bereft of confidence, bereft of competitiveness. And down back was and when it counted in that first half, when it really counted to try and slow the bleeding, they were at 6s and 7s, whatever that means. And a really telling image to me was, and I tweeted this at someone, I said, in the front half, Clare are leading the Tipperary players back toward goal. So, you would have a Clare player with the ball in hand or the ball on the hurl, driving at the goal, and the Tipperary defender was behind, chasing. And then in Tipperary's front half, Tipperary were being led to the ball by the Clare defenders. So it was an illustration that Tip were second to the ball, all over the ground for large swathes of the contest. Clare were just cleaner with their passing. They were feistier in the tackle. They were more disciplined in defence. It was really a complete domination. I thought there was a bit of an emotional come down for Tip after week one against Waterford. Clare absolutely primed for this opening match, but I think it's a bit of a cop-out to say that it was an emotional come down for Tipperary, and that explains it. Clare were very, very much, very clearly the better side. There's obviously still some work to do for Colin Bonner and his Tipperary team, and I don't think an emotional come down excuses the lack of defensive discipline and the the lack of effective basic hurling skills. That was something that really stood out. Tip were really sharp last week against Waterford, and this week there was fumbles, there were, balls ricocheted off hurleys, and it was just messy. It was a messy performance. As I said, a sporadic threat up forward. It was never systematic, and down back was as big a mess as you're likely to see. I'd say there's some players back there. Your Ronan Ma, he'll be, I imagine, quite stung by the way his backline setup played. I thought Craig Morgan was good in spells again, but overall, there'll be some questions being asked as Tipperary go down 216 to Clare 321. Jason Ford 7 points for Tip. Jer Brown, I thought Jer Brown was great, and it sort of made me wonder why he didn't start. He seemed, when he came on, exactly the type of player that Tipperary were lacking in the first half. Someone with aggression and skill to run at Clare and make them accountable in defence, and that's exactly how his goal came about. Ronan Ma scored 2 points. Barry Heffernan 1 goal. For Clare, Tony Kelly 1 goal 7. Ian Galvin, 1 goal 2. Duggan, 1 goal 2. Mounsey, 2 points. I named John Conlon my man of the match for Clare. Would not be denied. Down back was an absolute monster, winning 50-50 balls, plucking balls out of the air. I thought he was a real driving force for Clare. The scorers for Tipperary, as I said, it was Ford with 7, Jer Brown 1, 3, Heffernan 1 goal and no points. Maha 2, and then singles to Barrett, McGrath, Breen, and Keogh. 4, Clare. A beautiful list of scorers. 1-7 to Kelly, 1-2 for Galvin, 1-2 for Duggan. 2 points each to Mounsey, Taylor, and O'Donnell. 1 point each to Fitzgerald, Hayes, and McInerney. So what's next for these two teams? Well, for Tip, the Premier County go on bye, and it could be a tough couple of weeks of soul searching for a team that found itself in total shambles in front of their home fans. Tip were completely broken down at the back against Clare. As I said already, the attacking threat they offered was more sporadic than systematic. There's a lot to work on. With progression in the tournament now no longer solely in their hands, they would need now to get 2 massive wins in the last 2 weeks and have other results fall their way to sneak in to that 3rd spot. It's going to be interesting to know what Colin Bonner wants to see out of these next 2 games. What are you looking for from particular players? What things are you looking to perfect within your system, knowing that you're really up against it? These are your only, essentially, these are your only 2 championship games left until next year at this point, unless, absolutely miraculous things happen. So I'm really interested to see how Tip approach these last 2 matchups, whether we see more young guys floated through the team. It's going to be really, really interesting couple of last games for the Premier County. For Clare, well, they couldn't have dreamed up a better start to their 2022 championship campaign than drubbing a rival on the road, unless, of course, they can dream up a second road beating of another rival in Cork. If Clare can go into Rebels territory and emerge with a second victory from 2 games, then they've put themselves from the long grass into prime position to be one of the 2 teams that qualify out of Munster behind Limerick. And I think there's really impressive signs there for Clare. The way they played, obviously, I kind of expect the skilled hurling from Clare, the work rate and the physicality that they showed, and the confidence. They were just bursting with confidence and self-belief. I think I'd be excited if I was a fan of the Banner County, because they really did a number on tip and have, launched their championship campaign in style. So if they can go and make it 2 from 2 against Cork, they've put themselves in the box seat there. So that's my game recaps of the 3 games I was able to watch. But before I go, let's whip you through all the results. So the Joe McDonough Cup, Antrim, 6-22 to 316 victory over Down, flexing their muscles. Antrim smacked a goal in really early in this contest. Carlo went down to Kerry. Impressive win on the road for Kerry. A regular viewer of the JBSE, Dylan Duffy, congratulations to your Kerry team, as Kerry win 3 goals, 21 to 15 points. Offaly win 222 to 19 against Meath. That leaves the Joe McDonough Cup standings with Antrim out in front on 4 points with a plus 16 point differential. You've got 4 teams behind them, all locked on 2. Kerry, Carlo, Offaly, and Down separated only by point differential. Meath staring that relegation spot down the barrel. No points on the board yet and a minus 34 point differential. Flick over to the Leinster Championship. Wexford, we covered, lost to Dublin by a point. Kilkenny marched over Laois 234 to 114. Galway, a dominant win over Westmeath. Galway winning 336 to 117. That leaves Kilkenny and Dublin locked in the top 2 spots. Kilkenny ahead of Dublin on a much superior point differential. Galway in that 3rd qualification spot on 3 points with a plus 25 point differential. Wexford in 4th with 1 point. Laois and Westmeath both on 0 points. Westmeath staring that relegation spot square down the barrel. Munster Championship, we already covered the results there, with Limerick winning over Waterford and Clare trouncing Tip. That leaves Limerick on top on 4 points with a plus 14 point differential. Clare over Waterford in 2nd spot via superior point differential. You've got Cork and Tipperary sharing the bottom 2 spots, separated by just 1 point of point differential. So those are all the results. I'll be back in a few days with an update on my Fantasy Hurling 2022 adventure. We'll have a look at how some of my transfer moves paid off and who scored points for me in the 2nd week of play. If you'd be so kind, hit that subscribe button. It sends good vibes your way, helps me to grow the channel, which is much appreciated. Until next time, guys, thanks so much for watching.